Welcome to episode 113 of the Women of the Military podcast. This week, my guest is Jasmin Moghbeli. She was selected by NASA to join the 2017 astronaut candidate class and graduated in January of 2020. In December, NASA announced the names of 18 astronauts from its corps to form the Artemis team and help pave the way for the next astronaut missions to the moon. Jasmin was one of those 18 astronauts selected and potentially could be one of the first women or the first to step on the moon's surface. I love learning more about the space industry and what is happening, and so it was an honor and a privilege to do this interview with NASA and Jasmin. It's another great interview, so let's get started. You're listening to Season 3 of the Women of the Military podcast. Here you will find the real stories of female service members. I'm Amanda Huffman. I am an Air Force veteran, military spouse, and mom. I created Women of the Military podcast in 2019 as a place to share the stories of female service members past and present, with the goal of finding the heart of the story while uncovering the triumphs and challenges women face while serving in the military. If you want to be encouraged by the stories of military women and be inspired to change the world, keep tuned for this latest episode of Women of the Military. So welcome to the show, Jasmin. I'm excited to have you here.
Thanks, Amanda.
So let's start with, why did you decide to join the military?
Well, I think from a fairly young age, I know by junior high, I was already looking into the military. I think part of it was, my grandfather on my mother's side was the 4-star admiral in the Iranian Navy. My grandfather on my father's side served in the Iranian military. And, I remember some stories my grandfather had told me. And I think my interest in becoming an astronaut from a young age certainly was something that got me looking into the military. And then just so many things about it appealed to me, like that, I'd always played on sports teams, so the camaraderie and teamwork aspect was really appealing. The kind of adventurous side of it and getting to travel and do different things was appealing to me. I think service to country, I think based on my parents' background, had a real appreciation for what the U.S. had offered me in terms of opportunities. So that was really appealing to me. So I think there were just a lot of things that drew me to it. And so by junior high, I was already interested in it. And as I got older, I just, refined looking at the different branches and which one I would want to join. And by, college, I ended up not doing ROTC because, my parents kind of talked me out of it. But between my junior and senior years of college, I went through officer candidate school for the Marine Corps. And after that, I was pretty set on the Marine Corps and commissioned after I graduated.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what do you think your parents deterred you from doing ROTC? Do you think that just had to do with keeping your options open, or what was that about?
Yeah, I think so. I came really close to going to the Naval Academy, and I ended up getting into MIT, which I think for me was a bit, I wasn't expecting to get accepted to MIT maybe. So for me, once I, went and visited, that was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. And they, I think, felt exactly like you said, you're going to MIT, you don't know what you're going to want to do when you graduate. Don't commit yourself to this. And, my argument was, well, they'll pay for my school. So that's kind of a big deal and a big help. And so my parents said, okay, we'll help pay for school. And I was like, okay, but I may end up joining anyway, which is what I did.
That's an interesting story. And it's interesting to hear about how your parents were like, keep all your options open. And you're like, okay, but they pay for school. And they're like, we'll help you with that.
Yeah. And, it's funny because by the time I actually did end up commissioning, so my freshman year of college, right at the beginning, I wasn't even there a month yet when 9/11 happened. And that obviously really changed the environment and what joining the military really meant for my future. So, when it really came down to it in a post 9/11 world and I decided to join the Marine Corps, they definitely were concerned about it. But once I made that decision and commissioned, they've been nothing but supportive.
That's awesome to hear. I think parents just want to make sure we make the right decision. I feel like my parents were a little wary, but then once I joined the Air Force, they were on board and same type of thing, always supportive.
Right.
So let's talk about it. So you joined a few years after September 11th. What was it like to go active duty into the Marine Corps as an officer in those, what year was it exactly when you graduated?
So I graduated in 2005. So I commissioned after graduating in 2005. And I had an air contract, so I still had several years of training ahead of me. I went through the basic school, which was, 6 months in Quantico for the Marine Corps that every officer goes through. And then from there, I still had to go through flight school. So I didn't get my wings until, June of 2008.
Yeah, that's a long process. I think sometimes, even though I interview people, I forget how long the process it is to go from commissioning to getting your wings and what that experience is like. So were there any challenges that you faced in those years of training to become a pilot?
Well, in primary, I struggled a lot initially because I have a pretty bad sense of direction. And so that was honestly my biggest challenge was I would get lost flying. And so that was for me I had an aerospace background. So the academics, as long as I studied, weren't a problem. The briefing wasn't really a problem. The actual stick skills of flying, I was okay at. But my biggest problem was I would get lost.
That's interesting and kind of funny. I guess we're all humans, right?
Right.
So besides that, did that hamper your moving forward, or did you just deal with it and move forward through the progression, or did that cause any major setbacks in graduating?
I wouldn't say it caused major setbacks. There was definitely a point where I remember coming back from one flight and we had on wings assigned to us. So, for most of our initial training, we were with the same instructor for consistency and things like that. And I remember him finally saying to me, I know you know your stuff, and please spend less time focusing on the briefing items and just lay down kind of a map of the working area in your living room and juggle or do something to distract you or so that you need to multitask and then kind of navigate your way around your living room. And I remember coming back from one particularly challenging flight where I didn't perform very well. And him saying, it's flights like these that make me question my ability to instruct. And I was like, wow, that I never forgot that because that was a tough moment. But eventually, I did what he suggested. I laid down that map and juggled and walked around and eventually it clicked for me and kind of the light bulb went on. And from that point forward, I was fine.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to overcome a struggle. That's kind of a cool advice that he gave you, and I'm glad that it worked and it clicked and made it a little bit easier for you.
For sure, me too.
So you graduated from pilot training, and where did you go after that?
So I was lucky enough to get AH-1 whiskeys, the Super Cobras on the West Coast, which was my top choice. And so I went out to Camp Pendleton, had about maybe 4 or 5 months in the squadron training to fly the Cobra specifically. And then from there, went to my first fleet squadron, HMLA 367 SCAR, which was right there at Pendleton at the time. They're now, the squadron's now in Hawaii, but at the time they were at Pendleton.
And what was that experience like? Do you have any favorite memories or even struggles that you went through in that gearing up training and then the transition into being operational?
Yeah, I think for me, so I joined the squadron shortly after they had just gotten back from Iraq and were preparing for a deployment to Afghanistan. So I had the full time with the squadron to work up, get my initial qualifications that I needed to basically be a co-pilot for that deployment. And then we left for that first deployment and we were out of Camp Bastion in the Helmand province in Afghanistan. And for me, the actual work we did there as a Cobra pilot, there was a lot of work for us to do there. I'll say that. And so it was rewarding being able to, know that when we flew overhead, those Marines or other troops on the ground really appreciated our being there and kind of the protection we offered. So in that regard, it was really satisfying. I think the hardest part for me was I was the only female in my peer group and the only female Cobra pilot. And so that created kind of a sense of isolation because all my fellow, first lieutenants and junior captains shared a tent together. And I was in another tent with every single woman in the squadron, from the lance corporal up to the captains. And so that was, I think, the most challenging part.
Yeah, that's a common theme that I've heard from other women who've deployed, being one of the only females, or it's interesting that like all the males were in one tent together, so there was probably a lot of camaraderie between them and they spent a lot of time together, and then you were in another tent, so you were separate and kind of not an outsider, but kind of feeling like an outsider because you weren't in that same environment as everybody else.
Yeah, and because the tent of my peers, it was just our peer group, they weren't with junior or senior people. It was just them, and they had all that time to kind of bond. And, for me, I was in a separate tent, really not with anyone from my peer group. There was one other female officer, but we were for the most part on opposite shifts, and she was also more senior to me at the time. And so it just, you're already deployed and away from your friends and family. And that, to me, was by far the hardest part of it.
Yeah, that loneliness. I was really lucky when I deployed because I deployed with another lieutenant. And at the time, I didn't realize how lucky I was to have that friend, that person that I could hang out with and spend time with. And after doing the podcast and talking to enough women, I realized how lucky I was just to have her there and not experience that same type of loneliness. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think it makes a big difference having that.
Yeah, I got really lucky. There were only 2 female civil engineers. I went on a PRT and we were on the same team. And I was like, I don't know how that happened, but I'm so glad it did.
Yeah, for sure.
So are there any highlights that you want to talk about your military career before we start diving into the exciting part for me, because my husband and I are all about NASA and the space stuff going on. So is there anything from your military career that you want to talk about before we dive into the switch and how that all happened?
I think that deployment, although, there were aspects of it that were very challenging, that was a highlight for me personally, because as a Cobra pilot, I was doing exactly what I trained to do, as my first deployment. So certainly in some ways the most memorable. Did 2 deployments after that, which, I think like anything else for me, the people are what really stands out and make things memorable throughout. And then my time, I think, as a test pilot, I also really enjoyed.
Yeah, so let's talk about being a test pilot, because from what I understand, that's part of the path to becoming an astronaut, if I understand it right. Why did you decide to apply to become a test pilot?
For me, there were several reasons. One, so, I've dreamed of being an astronaut since I was a kid. And, I tell people that at times that was at the forefront of my mind, and at times it was very much in the background. During the years I was deploying, it was very much in the background, but as I was on my 3rd deployment and I knew I was nearing the end of that tour and moving on to a B billet, it got me thinking again, hey, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go in the future? And I kind of remembered that, hey, this astronaut thing was something you've always been interested in since you were a kid. And becoming a test pilot, for me, with my background as an engineer and my operational experience, it combined 2 things that I love. And so it wasn't even a question of applying. It was just a matter of whether I got it or not.
So what's the application process like? Is it really competitive to become a test pilot, or what's that experience like?
I think, like most things in the military, it depends on timing. And they're looking to fill test pilot slots in different, for different aircraft and different platforms at different times. So it partially depends on the need and how many people depend to apply, decide to apply at that time. And so I don't know how competitive it was the time I applied or how many other people applied for that slot. I think, generally it tends to be a fairly competitive thing. But the application process itself, I don't remember in detail. I know, we have a board that basically selects people, and we had to submit all our qualifications and flight time. And I think our, scores from college or GPA, all that sort of thing factored into it.
Yeah, and so then you got selected, and do you go to school to learn how to be a test pilot, or how does that all work?
Yeah, absolutely. So the school is, I went to the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School. There are a couple of different ones, and it's just under a year, about 10, 11 months total of training. And the big kind of running joke there is you spend half the day flying, half the day in class, and half the day report writing, which, obviously doesn't really add up. So it's a very time-consuming class. And the flying aspect of course, you get to fly many different aircraft. I think I flew over 20 different aircraft in my time there. But you always know after you do a flight, you're going to have to pay for it by writing a report about it. So that's kind of the payback every time you get to fly a cool aircraft.
It's like, oh, I got to fly this really cool airplane, but now I have to write a report. That's kind of interesting. And I've heard that about test pilot school. That it's really intense and time consuming. And I like your half. That math doesn't work, but that's what it was. That's a good way to explain it.
Yeah. And no single part of it is that challenging. It's just the combination of everything and trying to prioritize your time. And what my, one of my bosses who I worked for right before going to test pilot school, he knew me pretty well. And he was also a test pilot. And he said, Jaws, I know you're a perfectionist, but perfect is the enemy of good enough. And you need to remember that when you're there. And that was really good advice for me, because you can't spend your time making every single thing perfect. You have to know what good enough is and prioritize your time between all the different competing interests.
Yeah, that's a great quote, and probably something that has it stuck with you throughout your career? Some quotes stay with you forever, and the fact that you brought it up, I wonder if it stuck with you as you continue your career forward.
It's definitely something I try to remind myself of. I think, I definitely still have a tendency to be a perfectionist, and so it is something I have to constantly remind myself of.
Yeah, it's hard to not be a perfectionist. I know what that's like.
Yeah.
So you graduated from test pilot school and you started. Did you go to your I'm going to say base because I'm Air Force, but I know that's wrong. Where did you go once you graduated?
Yeah, so I was stationed immediately after. So I went to China Lake, California, on Ridgecrest, did a tour doing developmental test out there with VX-31. I was mostly flying the upgraded Cobras and Hueys, the AH-1 Zulus and UH-1 Yankees. And while I was there, I think I'd been there about a year and a half or 2 years. They actually made the decision to move all of those aircraft, the Cobras and Hueys, out of China Lake. And they consolidated developmental test, on the East Coast in Pax River, Maryland. And at the same time, we're standing up an integrated operational test squadron for the Marine Corps in Yuma, Arizona. And so I ended up moving to Yuma, Arizona, and kind of helping stand up that squadron and switching over from developmental test to operational test.
That sounds really interesting. What was the main difference between developmental and operational test?
Basically, things go through developmental test first. And in developmental tests, we're the ones looking at, does this meet the requirements? We're also paying attention to, does it serve the purpose for the mission, but we're really testing, does this meet the requirements and aircraft performance and the systems that are on the aircraft, whether those are, weapon systems, navigation systems, whatever they are. When it comes to operational tests, the focus is really on the mission. And, does this allow us to meet mission? And so that's the primary focus for operational test.
That's really interesting. Was it during this time that you decided to apply to become an astronaut?
Yeah, so I was stationed in Yuma at the Operational Test Squadron when NASA announced they were accepting another class for 2017, and that's when I decided to put in an application.
And what was that experience like? You said it had been a dream since you were little, so was waiting to find out if you got in like torture?
Yes, and there was a lot of it. Yeah, so initially, I just put in my application into USA Jobs. It's basically like, a long resume and there, a summary of my aeronautical experience and a couple other things. But the initial application, you put that in and then you're just waiting for months and months. And the first indication that you've kind of made it to the next step is if your references get contacted. So, down up to 5 references. And if they hear something, that's kind of your next indication. And I had actually told my references, hey, please let me know if you get contacted so that I know. And none of them told me. So I actually thought I had been cut and was pretty disappointed because I felt this was the time in my career that I would have the best application to submit. And I was like, wow, I didn't even make it to the references round. That's pretty disappointing. And it turns out just none of them had told me, which I eventually found out. And then after that, you wait another several months. And eventually I finally got a call from NASA asking me to come in for the first round of interviews. And that was, I want to say, in the fall of 2016. And so went in for that. And they had us come in about groups of 10, and it was about 3 days long. And it's an incredible experience. Like, even if I hadn't gotten it, which I'm really glad I did, it would have certainly been a memorable experience getting to come down here, meet the other applicants who I was very impressed with, and meet the people here at Johnson Space Center. And then, I go home and wait another several months and eventually get a call back. I think I came in for the second and final round of interviews, I want to say in February of 2017. And that was, again, 10 people at a time. But that was a week long here at Johnson Space Center. And then after that, went home and waited. And, I didn't find out until May. The end of May is when they called and asked if I still wanted to join the 2017 class of astronauts. Which, of course, I said yes.
That's a lot of waiting. And man, a bummer that your references didn't be like, hey, guess what? You're like kind of disappointed. And then...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay. I went through a period of being very disappointed and then very excited when I found out they actually had been contacted.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. And I don't think people realize, I guess, not how competitive, but like how much of a process it is to go through the process to become an astronaut. I didn't know that it took so much long with the application and the references and the interviews and then the interviews and all the waiting in between. So that's really interesting. So let's talk about your training to become an astronaut. What was that like?
Honestly, there were parts of it that were very challenging, but overall really, really fun and rewarding. So, we kind of have, I'd say, 5 main areas that we focus on during initial training, but there are also so many other varied things we're learning throughout that time. So, learning the systems on the International Space Station, flying the T-38 jets, learning to speak Russian, learning how to do spacewalks, and then learning how to operate the robotic arm are kind of the big sections. But we also do geology training, and we do actual field work for that, which was incredibly interesting. We do some biomedical training. We have some dental and medical classes here and there. And so there are just so many different things. And we did a bunch of expeditionary training as well, to include doing a NOLS course, the National Outdoor Leadership School. So it's, no day is the same. And for me, I grew up as one of those kids who couldn't decide which clubs I wanted to join because I wanted to join all of them. So for me, I loved the fact that we got to do so many different things.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And how long is the training to become an astronaut?
The initial training was about 2 years. So we started at the end of August of 2017 and we graduated in January of this year, 2020.
Yeah, so I knew it was long, so I just wanted to make sure the listeners knew how long it was. Because you learned all those different things, but over a pretty long period of time, and it sounds like it was just so interesting. And as you still work at NASA and you're an astronaut, are you still learning new things, or what's going on in your day-to-day job now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's kind of similar to the military where it's one of those jobs where training never ends. It's pretty continuous. And so, after that initial training, you just move right into pre-assignment training. So, your robotics training continues, just getting the higher level qualifications. I still take a few Russian classes every week, one-on-one classes. I learned how to become, a Capcom and a ground IV. And so the training absolutely continues. But in addition to that, after we graduated, we also got assigned technical duties, which for me was very similar to, in the Marine Corps as a pilot, we also get assigned our ground job. And so it was very analogous to that. And so for mine, I've been working in our exploration branch, which deals with all the spacecraft and ground systems that we're going to be using to go to the moon and then eventually further onto Mars. So basically past low Earth orbit. And my focus specifically has been mostly on the human landing system or the next generation of lunar landers.
Sounds really cool. So interesting and so exciting. There's so much stuff happening in the space arena with the Space Force coming in. And then as we're recording this, the second, or I guess the official launch with SpaceX happened this past weekend, which is really exciting to see all the things happening with NASA and SpaceX and the space arena. So you're doing training and then you're doing your core job. Do you know when you'll get a chance to go to space, or how does that all work?
No, I don't know. So it will just all depend on when I'm assigned to a mission. And, that's one of those things where, so our class graduated with 13 people. So, any one of us could get assigned basically at any time. And so for some people, that will happen in the very near future. And for some people, that will happen maybe in a couple of years. And so it really just depends. But as you said, it's a very exciting time for human space exploration. And there are more varied mission sets, I think, that are possible to be assigned to than really at any point before in history. So it's that aspect of it is very exciting. But I don't know exactly when I'll be assigned.
That sounds like the military too.
Yeah, that definitely carries over.
Yeah. It just sounds so exciting to be on the leading edge of I can't wait to see what happens over the next 10 years, just watching what's been happening so far. And it's just really exciting to see. So when you get the chance to go to the space, what are you most excited about or looking forward to?
For me, something I've heard a lot of astronauts talk about is how looking back at the Earth from space kind of just changes you. And I think, it's something we can sit here and try to think about on Earth, okay, we're just kind of a small planet in the grand scheme of things, really small planet in the grand scheme of the vastness of space. But being able to actually kind of see that with your own eyes and get a real sense for it, I think I really look forward to having that experience, because it's hard when you're sitting here on Earth and it seems so big and it holds everyone we know and love. And so that to me, I think will be really exciting.
Yeah, that's kind of funny, because if I was going to space, that's the same thing that I was like, that would be the coolest thing to just look at Earth from above, because you see it in pictures, but I know it can't be the same as when you're actually in space.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I remember just the first time I went to the Grand Canyon, I had seen many pictures of it. And even that, I remember just being in awe and being like, wow, like, the pictures just don't do it justice. And I think I was afraid when I got there, I would be underwhelmed because, I'd seen so many pictures of it. But when I first, stood on the rim and looked out over the Grand Canyon, I was just amazed. And I imagine it's that, times a factor of however many, 10 or whatever. But
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a great analogy and a great way to talk about it. Is there anything else from your time at NASA that you wanted to talk about, or even from your military career in general?
I think similar to the military, one of the things I was most impressed with when I got here was the people at Johnson Space Center. I knew a lot of people went into these missions and accomplishing them. But when you get here and realize, hey, when I'm training in the neutral buoyancy lab to learn how to do spacewalks, there are so many people there, the divers, the safety people, the people controlling the environmentals in my suit, the comms, the people that are the test directors and test coordinators, and just how many people go behind preparing each of us astronauts for these missions, and actually, the engineering and manufacturing and everything that makes these missions possible. I was really impressed by that. And also by the humility of everyone in the astronaut office. You would think, I came in thinking, wow, these people are so incredible. They must think they're, the greatest. And everyone was so humble and so kind and willing, despite being so busy, to always offer to those of us in the junior class and give us guidance. And, my mentors spend hours watching videos of me in the neutral buoyancy lab because that was the thing I struggled with most, and giving me tips. And so it's just really impressed with the people here.
It sounds like more than just a job, like a community and a family of people that are supporting each other. And I bet the energy, especially with all the things happening, there's an excitement and just a push to make everybody better, to make the whole organization better. That's really cool.
Yeah, there's definitely an excitement. And, you can tell, like, when we launched Bob and Doug on the first SpaceX mission, and, we launched Mike, Victor, Shannon, and Suichi the other day, there's, people get emotional at the success of these. So, there's a lot of passion and a lot of caring behind all the work that goes into it. And you're right. It's more than just a job.
Yeah, that's really cool. So my last question is going to be, what advice would you give to young women who are interested in becoming an astronaut?
Well, I guess a couple things. So my opinion is you should never do something just because you think it will get you to being an astronaut. If you look at just my class or even the astronaut office as a whole, so many people took so many different paths to getting to this point. And I think every single one of us would be willing to admit there's also some luck involved. I could have done everything right, quote unquote, throughout my life and still not been picked up for this. So I think it's really important to make sure everything that you do, you're doing things that you love and care about and are passionate about, and just not closing the door to becoming an astronaut. And then the other thing, and something that I think has been the hardest for me to internalize, and maybe it's more so as a woman, or maybe it's not, but was just really believing that I belonged. And, that I mean that throughout my career, in the military and, at test pilot school and coming here to NASA. There are so many times where I felt like, wow, these people around me are just so incredible. How did I get here? How am I with them? And, you need to have that kind of, I think, quiet confidence of knowing the value you bring. You do belong. So I think that's something that's really important, especially for, young women to hear.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I really like that you said, like, you could do everything right and it's a little bit of luck and timing. I had Nicole Malowski on my podcast, and she talked about how, like, sometimes the stars just align and you're in the right place at the right time and everything works out, and sometimes it doesn't, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I think that's a good reminder to just do your best.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel incredibly lucky to be here. And, I can acknowledge, all the hard work I did to get here, et cetera. But I also met, like, during that selection process, I met a lot of other people who 100% could have been sitting here in my shoes or in any one of our shoes. So there's just no denying that there is some luck. And like you said, the stars aligning to get me and the others who are here to this position.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really learned a lot, and I really enjoyed hearing your experience of your military career and then what you've done at NASA so far, and I'm excited to watch for your name on a future mission.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Amanda.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Women of the Military Podcast. Do you love all things Women of the Military Podcast? Become a subscriber so you never miss an episode, and consider leaving a review. It really helps people find the podcast and helps the podcast to grow. Are you still listening? You could be a part of the mission of telling the stories of military women by joining me on Patreon at patreon.com/women of the military, or you can order my book, Women of the Military, on Amazon. Every dollar helps to continue the work I am doing. Are you a business owner? Do you want to get your product or service in front of the Women of the Military podcast audience? Get in touch with the Women of the Military podcast team to learn more. All the links on how you can support Women of the Military podcast are located in the show notes. Thanks again for listening and for your support.